This is the Nebraska Greats, a weekly podcast as a service to the Nebraska Greats Foundation, which serves former collegiate athletes facing medical needs and financial challenges. Your tax-deductible contribution will change the life of a former college sports hero. Please give online at negreats.org. And now, here's your host, Ross Jernstrom.
You are listening to the Nebraska Greats, a podcast produced by the Nebraska Greats Foundation, which serves collegiate athletes facing a medical need and a financial challenge. Learn more or give generously at www.negreats.org. Hi again, everyone. I'm Ross Jernstrom, former sportscaster at KETV and WWT. I covered sports in Omaha for the past 40 years in Omaha. And my guest today, we're thrilled to have former Creighton Bluejay, who played from 2001 to 2003 at Creighton. And he was also, right now, he's the color commentator for Creighton radio broadcasts on 1620 The Zone. Please welcome Brody Deren. Brody, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Ross. Thanks for having me.
Well, Brody, let's go back to the start of your career at Creighton. You grew up in Harlan, Iowa, and then you went to Northwestern University and then transferred in 2000 to Creighton University. Tell us about that decision.
Yeah, good question. So my freshman year, I had elected to go to Northwestern. Played for a coach named Kevin O'Neill there. Dana Altman had recruited me at Creighton out of high school. The appeal of the Big Ten as well as the academics of Northwestern is sort of what sided me that way. My mother's actually from Evanston. And grew up there. And however, after 1 year at Northwestern, things didn't pan out favorably. We won 5 games that year. Out of 318 Division I teams, we were 318th in scoring. We had one game that we scored 2 games that we scored single-digit points in the first half. So things weren't going the right direction. We'll put it that way. It wasn't the experience that I had envisioned. So I elected to transfer. And Coach Altman and I had a relationship, obviously, from him recruiting me out of high school. Coach Greg Grensing, who was a longtime assistant for Dana, and I had a good relationship. Darren DeVries had joined Dana's staff as a graduate assistant at the time, and I had known him as well. Along with a few of the players, and Creighton was obviously on the rise, on the way up, was doing great things in the Valley, had made and qualified for a couple of NCAA tournaments in a row. And so, joining that program or this program in the direction that was headed, feeling like I could contribute and help at a good school, not far from my hometown, it was kind of a no-brainer. So I had some other opportunities I looked at when transferring, but it didn't take long to determine that Creighton was the right fit.
Well, Brody, you were part of one of the great moments in Creighton basketball in March Madness. Your junior year, you go 23-9, but there was a game at the United Center in Chicago, and you played the defending national champion Florida, and it was an overtime game, and Terrell Taylor hits that buzzer beater to upset Florida. What do you remember about that tournament?
Well, that's obviously the biggest highlight. And Terrell, if I remember correctly, was held scoreless in the first half and scored 28 after halftime, including 8 made threes after halftime. So, to go into double OT and battle with that squad and then win, we won that game 83-82 on Terrell's last second shot. That's a pretty difficult memory to beat from that perspective. But it was funny because, we're playing at the United Center in Chicago that holds about 20,000, and roughly the entire arena was rooting on our behalf in that particular game and enjoyed the upset. And then 2 nights later, we faced Illinois, and they had played 3 regular season games, 10 tournament in that facility. And of the 20,000 the place holds, about 18.5 were Illinois fans. So that crowd turned on us real quickly. So we ended up losing that game. we were in that game. It was a tie ball game with 10 minutes to go. But Frank Williams, who was an All-American point guard for them, took over, and he scored 20 in the second half, and they were just ended up being too much for us, and then beat us. I don't remember exactly what the final score was there, but the margin of victory was probably 8 to 12 points, somewhere in that ballpark. So, but a phenomenal experience, fun to be in Chicago that time of year. With everything going on, and it was St. Patty's Day was over that same weekend, so you had the Green River, and so our fans and all the fans of the NCAA tournament were there, drinking plenty of green beer and enjoying the Green River. So
I remember I was in press row and Reva Altman was sitting behind me, and she gave me a high five after Terrell hit the shot, and it was a great party atmosphere that day, and kind of the house that Michael Jordan built. It was a cool atmosphere. The next year, you guys have one of the greatest seasons in Creighton history, 29-5, but you lost in the first round of the tournament. Just talk about March Madness. It seems like upsets can happen at any time, and that's really what makes the tournament so great.
Oh, no doubt about it. And we've seen plenty this year, obviously, in 2021. But yeah, so the previous year we were a 12 seed, we beat a 5. The following year, the year we're referencing here, we were a 6 seed playing 11 seed Central Michigan. And I will tell you, Ross, we were probably overconfident going into that game. And in general, I think, we'd had a really good season. We finished the Missouri Valley Conference tournament by beating the pants off of Southern Illinois in the championship game, which was still one of my favorite games of all time. But so we felt really good about where we were going into that matchup, and based on the way the bracket laid out, as a 6, we won and had the 3 seed on the other side won, we would have played 3 seed Duke. And I think coming as a mid-major out of the Valley at that time, and Duke certainly being, the quality brand that Duke is, and the blue blood program that they were, we really wanted that shot. And I think we probably looked past Central Michigan a bit, and they were a great basketball team. We found ourselves down by 24 points soon after halftime. I think we were down 18 maybe at half. And they came out and punched us in the mouth, and we did recover, and we cut that game. We cut that lead to 2 with a minute to go, but we ended up turning it over on a possession at about the minute mark, and they got the ball back, ended up scoring, and then the rest was history. They hit free throws down the stretch. We didn't hit shots, and they won the ball game and closed it out. But certainly a disappointing way for us to finish that season, because we had such a great season. To your point, arguably to that point in time, one of the better seasons in Creighton basketball history, but certainly ended on a sour note, and we see it all the time. Obviously, there's a lot of Big Ten teams in particular this year who have gone home much earlier than expected.
Well, you've had the pleasure of being behind the microphone during one of the greatest seasons for Creighton this year. And I know you fill in a lot and do radio work for 1620 The Zone. How's that role from player to broadcaster been for you?
Oh, it's an absolute blast. I do it for a few reasons, but primarily to just keep me a little bit more tightly involved in the program. I'm here. I haven't ever had an aspiration to do what you did for 40 years, Ross, as a professional broadcaster. But I do appreciate it, and I do just enjoy the connection to the squad. I usually do 1 or 2 road trips a year. This year, of course, we didn't travel with the team, but that allows me to maintain some relationships and kind of really understand the dynamics of these teams and get to know the kids a little bit more. But I do really enjoy it at this surface level and doing, I'll usually do between 8 and a dozen games a year or something like that. So it keeps my basketball eye sharper. It keeps my involvement with the Creighton program tighter. And it's always a great seat to the ball game as well, for sure.
Well, you work with one of my great friends and one of the most talented guys on the microphone, John Bishop. He gets a little excited during games, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, there's nobody more passionate or animated about a Creighton basketball game calling it than John. Holy cow! I generally feel like my role is to try to play the other side of the yang to his yin, because he's going to bring enough energy for both of us.
Okay, well, let's talk about this year's Creighton basketball
Yeah.
team. They've made history the first time since 1974 that Creighton has gone to the Sweet 16. Of course, this is the expanded bracket now, many more teams than in the past in the 70s, and they've made it. Just talk about what is so special about this Creighton basketball team.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't know if these kids even, I know they've heard things like that, but I don't know if they realize the weight that they carried on their shoulders for alumni and fans and people that have been, supporters of and involved in this program for as long as they have. Primarily because, the success of Creighton basketball has always been marked with an asterisk, and this has been the biggest one. And I was part of those teams that we've already talked about that had the desire and the potential to get that monkey off the back. And there's been a few more teams since. And so for Coach McDermott, for these kids, for this program now to have eclipsed that milestone, I think that's a great monkey to get off the back, because now you can continue to set that bar at that level and hopefully surpass it. Certainly, potentially this weekend and potentially, for teams to coming forth. And I'm just so proud of this group of kids, not only for just, checking the box or passing the milestone, but obviously staying together, being able to support each other through what has been an incredibly difficult season for all sorts of reasons.
Right.
COVID primarily, but then, the recent distractions with, the locker room situation with the remarks from Coach McDermott and where the direction that could have driven this team. Instead, they've continued to play basketball together unselfishly with the purpose in mind. And so the leadership at the top, certainly from Father Hendrickson to Bruce Rasmussen to Greg McDermott, through the leadership of that locker room with Mitch Ballock and Marcus Zagorowski and Damian Jefferson and Denzel Mahoney, like that's very impressive based on all of the circumstances that have swirled here. So couldn't be prouder. Great group of kids, and certainly great basketball players as well.
Well, they've got a difference maker this year. You played with Ryan Sears, but this point guard, Marcus Zagorowski, is something special, and he has made a difference in the NCAA tournament. He causes a lot of problems. If you're the opposing coach, how do you play against him?
That's a difficult formula to figure out, Ross. I agree. He's been certainly the heart and soul of this thing, and generally Creighton's gone how Marcus has gone. But goodness, he's really stepped up his game over the last 10 or 12 games. He's a good finisher at the rim. He doesn't get to the line as much as I think he could. He's a lethal 3-point shooter. Obviously a great facilitator. So I think in the best case scenario, you're making him drive and try to finish over bigs, or hit up, a tough mid-range pull-up. But those are shots that he can make. So it's kind of a pick your poison thing. But the first things first, like you can't let him get in rhythm jump shots from behind the arc, because he shoots it at such a high clip and can do such damage there. If I'm an opposing coach, I try to get the ball out of his hands. Ball screen action, I would try to jump it hard, double team that, hard hedge, and just get the ball out of his hands, because when it's in him, there's a lot of. But again, going to the point that we talked about before, there's just so many weapons on this team. You're going to have to pick your poison somewhere. And right now, Denzel Mahoney has struggled a bit offensively shooting the basketball. And, that's probably the place that you would probably, as an opposing coach, sort of dare him to beat you. When Denzel is focused, puts his nose to the goal, gets to the free throw line, works his game inside out, that's also a dangerous formula to take as an opposing coach.
As a former center, you got to be impressed with the way Christian Bishop has played in these last 2 games in the NCAA tournament. What does he do in the paint that he's done so well?
He's just been really, really active. He's not the most physical guy. He is an elite level athlete. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he's a pogo stick. He can go up there and erase shots. He can go up there and obviously finish those lobs and those flip ups to the rim. And he does that with ease, which is just impressive at 6'7" and a kid that played guard growing up and has had to adapt to this role, something that he had never played really until he came to Creighton. So how has he been successful? It's generally just his activity. He guards the ball screen hard and hard hedges, and then he flies back into the paint and he's coming across the lane with help side defense to try to block shots and alter shots. Offensively, he's been really active on the offensive glass. I mean, that rebound against UCSB, where he eventually ended up getting fouled on that possession, went to the line and knocked those shots down. I mean, that rebound was a man's rebound. And so I love his activity and energy. He's clearly in great condition. He's playing generally 30 plus minutes a game. And to do that in the demands of that role on based on how Creighton likes to play offense and defense, it says a lot.
Well, we're winding up the interview, Brody. I just want to talk to you about, there's something about former Creighton players and the school that they played for. It's a family. And describe that feeling, because they welcome their former players back and they really connect with them. It's different than most schools. What's so special about Creighton?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I've got a tight fraternity of brothers that I consider brothers, and I think you certainly appreciate it as time goes on more and more. But for all of these kids that come through and play and sacrifice for and wear the same jersey, there's a unity there, that's kind of an unspoken unity, and you just root for those kids or as they continue on in life, like there's a desire to help one another regardless of what circumstances may be, how many years apart you might have been, and in terms of an alumni. There's a number of Omaha Creighton basketball alumni from a number of years my senior, that there's just an immediate bond regardless, just knowing that they went through similar battles, wars, and wore the same jersey. It is a special thing, and I definitely benefited from that, and I think that's been a big contributor to the results on the basketball court too. It's just the culture of the program out of the university.
Well, Brody, thanks so much for joining us here on the Nebraska Greats Foundation podcast, and we enjoyed having you join us today. Thanks.
Thank you, Russ.
Okay, this podcast today is produced by the Nebraska Greats Foundation. If you or know of a former collegiate athlete from any of the 16 four-year college or universities in Nebraska who has a medical need and a financial challenge, please refer them to www.anygreats.org. Again, this is Ross Jernstrom. Thanks to Brody Deren for joining us today.
This has been Nebraska Greats, a weekly podcast serving the Nebraska Greats Foundation. You can find each episode on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Play, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Please give generously to serve Nebraska's former sports heroes in need at anygreats.org. And be sure to follow the Any Greats on Facebook and Twitter.